I am just going to go through a lab actually that focuses on an element of using Kubernetes coming from the book by Brendan Burns called Designing Distributed Systems. So Brendan Burns wrote this book and he has these labs available. And one of them is really, well, simple from the context of using Kubernetes, not simple for me necessarily because I'm now jumping into this container orchestration world. But as I jump into it and I'm using it as examples in my class, I decided to use these labs in class as well. And in so doing, I'm not fully familiar with it, but I know a lot of the surrounding technologies. So it's working through the theory and practice using these labs. And this particular one, as I did it, I had some difficulty. So it reminded me that the next time I was doing labs, I would record it and get through the issue so that anybody else doing it, they might have a simpler go. And I might also try to create a PR. So whoever maintains this, they may have a better, somebody else may be able to use it if anybody cares at all. I may be the only one. Nevertheless, so it's a lab focused on the ambassador pattern, and it's pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is do request splitting, as the title is up here. So it's going to walk through the steps on how to do it using containers or pods in Kubernetes. And I've already kind of started only by creating the appropriate resource group here. So I'll go through these steps, and as I go through these steps, you will see why the resources I need get created or utilized in Azure. So notice the prerequisites. For this particular lab, it's being done in Azure. I imagine you could do the same thing on a local Kubernetes environment, which I may myself try at some other point, but I'm using Azure for just ease of getting started. So we have this subscription. We have the CD. I'm going to use the Cloud Shell. So these things will be installed for me automatically. I've already made a resource group, and I'm now going to create the container service, which is go across here, hit create, and search for AKS. And then choose that service, the first one, Azure Kubernetes service, and choose create. When you choose create, I'm using the simplest options just to get this lab sorted out. So I'm going to go with the dev test configuration. I'm going to call this test cube 1. STUS, no availability zone needed, free pricing tier. That should be it. I didn't know what to pick for this. I left it as is. Choose review and create to validate the script. So that's ready, hit create. That'll take a minute or so. It'll take a little while. While I was doing that, here's the lab, right? So as I mentioned, these are requirements. If you've never set up the CLI or use Kubernetes, you need to link it. So this linking step, I will not need to do, but walk through the rest, right? Then we will log into Azure. I don't need to do this because I'm using the Cloud Shell. From there, because of the user I've created, my subscription will already be set for that one user. I made a specific user that has only one subscription associated with it. If you didn't have that, I'm really glad they put this step in. So sometimes you have a number of subscriptions attached to a user. Make sure and set the appropriate one. Then we're going to get the credentials. Quick check over here. See how this is going. It's going. The deployment is in progress. Could have two of these. Suppose one. Yeah, so I'm going to get the configuration, verify the cluster, and all this stuff you'll be looking for on our side when you do it. Then we will create the configuration for the ambassador. If we see here, the descriptions they give are pretty useful. As you walk through it, you explain what you're trying to do. This content will go into the configuration, which is what is being instructed here in a specific subfolder, which we will make. Then we will. So this is important because they mention it's coming from this repository. But when I was doing it, this wasn't working. It couldn't find it, nor was this. So we'll see what I did to get around that. And then we'll expose the appropriate servers, expose experiment, expose the main one, experiment, make changes to the API version and the image, and then create a deployment and use this configuration. And now we're going to create a deployment, the ambassador deployment using this definition, changing this from that to apps v1, and really going to observe it after that. So once you deploy it, you make sure it's available for viewing. You're able to list if things go well, and from listing, test. And the point of doing this test is to demonstrate the 90% of traffic going in one direction, 10% in the other. Let's see where we are with this guy here. Still deployment is in progress. Let me to the resource group. So that's kind of beginning, going down this road. I'm going to start up the Cloud Shell. I'm going to get things going. Hopefully it should be done by the time I get to where I need it. So because I have a nice wide monitor, I think I could push this on one side and push this over there. Yeah, let's see. I don't like how that looks, to be honest. Let's minimize that. And again. Yeah, that looks okay. I was in the wrong window. All right, so there's enough space for that. Yeah, I think, where's my Cloud Shell? It's happening here, Cloud Shell. So refresh this view. There you go. You know, a decent size, nice, and that deployment is done. This up. So clear half window. All right, so we get started. All right, so as I said, I won't need to do this. I'm already logged in because I'm in the Cloud Shell. The subscription is already linked, so I don't need these two steps. Here, choose to get credentials, but the resource group's name is this guy here. Name of the AKS deployment is testcube1. So let's paste that in. Great. So we got that success statement. Then we set context. Good. Verify our cluster. Seem to be okay. Kubernetes. So things are a little different, but they look okay. There's no local host, so that's also good to know. Create a configuration for the Nginx ambassador. So the file is this, will contain this. It needs to live in this folder. So let's change that to, let's make that directory. So why am I reloading? What happened there? We need to do the authentication stuff again. No. Okay, good. So I've done this before to test it, which is useful. So let me cd into conf.d. Conf.d. Thing to do. Good. Next. Conf. You see that file contains everything here. Upstream backend, server deployment with a weight of 9, experiment deployment 80. So this means 90% of the traffic will go to web and the remaining will go to experiment. That's it. This is the same. I'm not familiar with Nginx, so I just kind of went with what they provided and that seemed to be okay. Now, some of these commands I may get, and it may indicate it's already been done. So we'll see as I run them. That's okay. So this one, let's come to this folder. Because like it says here, it must config maps must be mounted as directories. So you need the auto directory to make it run successfully. Right, that was created. You know, they should show the success commands. Let me confirm that this works fine. That seems to be okay. All right. I'll show why I did that in a little bit. So my web deployment.yaml file is different. It's different like this. Web deployment. Notice my API version is apps v1. 2 replicas. I included the selector because that's needed apparently when you run it in apps v1 as opposed to whatever this v1 beta is. To include the selector label. And then I don't think I need this to be spelled so incorrectly. So I'm going to change that spelling, but that's not necessary. The bigger deal is the image. Notice I have this image name instead of this image name, because when I did it the first time, it was reporting it couldn't find this image. So everything else should be the same. Control X, yes, and then create this. So CTL v8-f web YAML. All right, so that's created. All right. After it's been created, expose the web server. So I'll do the same for the experiment. So let's take a look. What I did with my file nano experiment. So you'll see here, again, the API version has changed to apps v1. I added in a selector label. And then again, change the image. The name is also, this is not necessary, but I feel like I want to change it. So that's that. Create the experiment. Right. After you create it, expose it. Good. Once you've done that, we need to, when we construct our pod on files, we need to make sure we reference our current configuration correctly, or it may fail. So we see later when constructing, you need a section like this. So we won't use this here, we would use it down here when creating the deployment. This is in the ambassador deployment file. All I needed to change thus far, and this was the apps v1 bit. I think that was all really, because it already had the selector as it turns out. So that should be all set. Yep, that should be all set. Apps v1. So let me close this and then say create. Nice. And I'm going to expose it. Okay, let me see what this looks like before I expose it. So they look all right. Maybe I see some terminating, but I think they're okay. Let's expose it here. Nice. I could run this again. Right. Notice mine is more verbose. Mine has more things running: ambassador deployment, experiment deployment, and web deployment. Now I can list my deployments. Just only the ambassador has the external IP. And for that, I can say curl that guy just to confirm things are working. Curl E. Right, and that looks like regular HTML. Welcome to ACI. Nice. So for here, I'm going to write a simple for. I won't do it like this because when I did it like this in PowerShell, it didn't work. I can't remember a PowerShell for. Nice. So I'm going to say for. Oh, did I have it already? Nice. But I may have lost the IP address. So let's type it out here. For 0. Less than 20. Good. But then it also needs to be output somewhere, right? Oh, maybe I needed to pipe it into, so it doesn't matter. It's all right. Good. So now we can look at the logs. CTL logs -L. Ah, cool. So you see those records going to web deployment. There should be 18 of them. And then if we change that to well, experiment deployment, just 2 of them, which is what we wanted. So I'm very happy that at the end that they gave you came to the finish line. As it turns out, I had some problems, but I didn't get to this section, which was really useful because the problems I had, I needed to inspect logs to understand and see some of the errors. So that was actually pretty good. But I didn't need it, as it turns out. So this is it. I will be modifying this and submitting a PR, but I'll do that right now. It's very simple. Can I just dot my way into it here? 1 sec. No, I'll submit a PR afterwards, and it will cover some of the changes I made to get this running. But that's it. Cheers. I was working on the single node pattern lab request splitter from the Brendan Burns book, Designing Distributed Systems. Cheers.